everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we kick this off, I do want to point out to the audience that we welcome questions. Please utilize the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Type in questions as they come up, and we will address those questions at the end. So I'd now like to turn this over to Stephen Saltstein, Forrest Family Office's CEO.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We greatly appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I was thinking about this and thinking about an analogy, and what I would say is this is the easy pass for surgery. So most surgery centers are still throwing change into a toll booth. Allan McNichol has invented the easy pass. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Allan McNichol and Dr. Bach. Allan is the CEO of Zuno Medical, and Dr. Bach is a medical advisor and an investor. So to begin with, gentlemen, if you don't mind, do you mind giving us just a minute on yourselves each?
Yeah, Dr. Bach, you want to?
Sure.
Go first.
I'm a practicing orthopedic surgeon, practicing like 17 years now, and I specialize in shoulder surgery and arthroscopic surgery. So I do surgery 2 to 3 times a week regularly. And I came across this company 6 years ago now, seven years ago. And I was immediately intrigued just because almost on a daily perspective, I see the challenges of surgical sterilization. And so medical school at Northwestern, orthopedic residency at Johns Hopkins, 2 additional fellowship years of training arthroscopic surgery at the place where I practice now called SCOE. And the reason I came there was because it was a pioneer in arthroscopic shoulder surgery. So they were the inventors and pioneers of a technology that is widespread today. And then the second fellowship in shoulder and elbow surgery, and then been practicing then, and then got very intrigued with this company because it solves a very real problem in a very good way. So,
fantastic, Allan.
And I will say more than 2 to 3 surgery, 2 to 3 days of surgery. So you do lots of surgeries in those days.
Right.
Clarify that.
I knew that, but that's okay.
Well, just in case everybody else didn't know that. So
fair enough.
Allan McNichol, CEO of Zuno Medical. I kind of joined the board very early stage when it was still really conceived as a filterless container that could automatically show people that it's still sterile. Founded by a couple of guys in the medical device distribution space. We can talk about that if interested later. But my background has been in technology and building products and bringing products to market. A lot of that was software, financial information, both small companies scaling large companies. One point I was, acquired with a company that was acquired by Reuters and trying to re-platform their whole financial information product suite to better compete with Bloomberg. I've been in the hydrogen fuel cell space, Internet of Things, and then got approached by these guys about this opportunity, and it really intrigued me on a number of fronts. Once I understood the need, I was very passionate about figuring out how to make this work and deliver on it.
And so tell us, what it does, what the machine does.
So, and we have 2 of them here. So basically, when Dr. Bach's doing a shoulder replacement, he's going to have whatever vendor, whether he's using the FX Shoulder, Stryker, or whoever he's using for that particular case, they're going to bring in anywhere from 5, 6, 8. One time when he was doing a revision, he sent me this picture of like 30 tray sets that all have to be sterilized for him to do that one procedure. And the total joints take a lot. The spine cases take a lot, whereas a hand or a cataract might take 1. But those will really put a lot of pressure on the surgery centers. And typically they're using some things, Dr. Bach, if you don't mind showing some of these, they're using either a rigid container that has these paper thin filters that I think give a very false sense of security about how well those are creating an effective sterile barrier. The other thing that's existed for a long time is what is affectionately called blue wrap in the industry. This is the same thing that you would see a surgeon's gown or a mask made of. It's a thicker version of that. They have to wrap it with a towel and they have to wrap it a particular way. The people that do that wrapping aren't paid very well. They're under immense amount of pressure because all this stuff that they're preparing to be sterilized needs to go fine in the OR for all these health systems to make money out of the OR. And typically, hospitals, 60% of their revenue is generated out of the OR. So that's the cash cow. And yet you have this area where it's very prone to, challenges. And what we've done is created a container that doesn't have any of those polypropylene barriers. Those barriers are a problem because any moisture, you're sterilizing with steam. And obviously there's moisture in steam. And if that moisture touches that barrier in any way, it creates a conduit for bacteria, and that has to be rejected. And so we have created something that has no polypropylene barrier. And there's actually no other sterile containment system in the industry that can say that. We are able to just lift these are electromechanical valves that are held up by a magnet. So I'm just lifting these valves up and I press one button. There's a blue ready light flashing. I don't know if you can see that within that, but this blue ready light flashes, and that means it's okay to go in the sterilizer. And it's going to actually start reading what's happening in the cycle. It's got sensors and algorithms that will do all of that and understand what's going on, because at one facility versus the next, they're going to run different parameters. One instrument set for the next might have different parameters. And then what we're doing is following that. And at the end of an autoclave cycle, it pulls a vacuum to evacuate that moisture and dry things out. We leverage that and know when it's ending, and we fire an electronic pulse into that with this control system. They drop and automatically create a vacuum sealed container. Dr. Bach, if you don't mind showing this, the other one that we have is sealed. And so we press the status button on that. You see a green check mark pop up. This one is not sealed, and you'll see a red X pop up on that. So just absolutely as easy as red and green. And if one of the reasons we have a check mark and an X is actually we had somebody at a hospital say, we've got colorblind people here. And so we thought, well, we got to find a good way to make sure we indicate that to them as well. And so we give that absolute assurance that whatever sets are going into the OR don't have a hole, don't have a tear, haven't been compromised in some way, and that when Dr. Bach goes to perform the surgery, there's not going to be any disruption.
So, Dr. Bach, I wanted to ask you, just from a surgeon's perspective, how often do sterilization failures delay or disrupt surgery?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The whole problem with the current sterilization process is that it's really slow, it's really tedious. And so in a nutshell, when the vendor drops off an instrument, they usually, especially the hospitals are slower, they tell the vendor it's not going to be ready for 2 to 3 hours. This changes it basically to half an hour. So emergency surgeries, you drop it off, it's ready to go. And so when I do surgeries, I did 2 total shoulders yesterday morning. I mean, maybe we used about six trays or whatnot. The processing itself is slow. Each tray is 2 hours or so. But then opening them up, getting them ready, reprocessing is extremely tedious. So every day for surgery, I'm affected by that. Namely in terms of setting the room up, turning the room over for the next case. And if there's an unexpected hole in the blue wrap, which is paper thin, which happens, the best data I found was like 5 to 15% of the time. So even if you take it on the low margin, say that happens 5% of the times, that delays or cancels surgery altogether, just because people can't wait around for 3 hours for the trays to be reprocessed. And so to answer your question, I see it on a regular daily basis in terms of how many cases I can do, how fast the trays can be processed, unexpected delays or problems. So every surgeon has been affected by blue wrap holes, SPD processing. There's a local hospital around here where they had processing problems and they canceled all their elective cases, and they delayed stuff for at least a week. And so
Right.
it's a headache for everyone in the medical field. Now, steam sterilization is amazing. There's no chemicals. It's just steam. It cleans stuff. It works great for all kinds of organisms, fungus, bacteria, viruses, but it's a very slow process. And so we're not asking to change the steam process or the steam sterilization in the autoclave. But the genius of these trays is it takes that autoclave, keeps it the same, and then uses that power to sterilely vacuum seal these so that we can use it quickly afterwards. So, and I can go into exactly how that medically works, but basically these trays take a sterilization process of 2 hours and go to half an hour. And so that allows more surgery cases. That allows shorter turnovers in between cases for me. The headaches, it prevents the headaches of unexpected delays. So we're going from an analog processing world to a digital processing.
And Stephen, there's a lot of special handling of the polypropylene solutions that have been around for 40 plus years in order to make sure that they don't become compromised by that moisture right after they're done with the cycle. And that adds a lot of extra time. And that's in the 2 hours of time that Dr. Bach is talking about. And one of the reasons that we can be so quick is, we have a vacuum sealed container. It's aluminum and silicon, and there's nothing in moisture that's going to breach or compromise that whatsoever. You could almost, you use the Easy Pass. I like that. But you can almost, we're using a standard autoclave to almost can surgical instruments. If people
Right.
from the food industry on that side look at that and just make sure that nothing can penetrate that, nothing can get back out. It's just sealed up until it's needed to be used in the operating room.
How much does this affect surgical revenue?
Yeah, I mean, it's big. I mean, so I was just at a facility in kind of southern part of Orange County yesterday, and it's a related affiliated with UC Irvine, and the person had said they had sets dropped off late by the vendor. They had a couple of hours to be able to turn them, and when you count the manual washing and everything else, it's usually 3 or longer at that point. And she said, I couldn't do them. And when I showed her what our containers did, she said, we wouldn't have had to have canceled that case if we had your containers. And so, if we take a surgery center that we launched at in the Bay Area, I mean, they were struggling to do, it's a 4 OR surgery. They're struggling to do 8 joint cases on a Friday with the amount of sterilization equipment they had. And they were running into holes and tears because the team was under a lot of pressure. They'd have to do like 65, 70 trays for that one Friday, and they'd be processing them all week long. We delivered 25 of our containers into their operation. Within 3 weeks, not only did they settle the Friday and get everything sorted in that, they're actually able to add another day for that same surgeon and get 6 cases done on the Wednesday. So that was a 75% uplift in their weekly turnover of total joint cases. That's in the range of probably $120,000 to $200,000 in revenue per month.
So is the hospital administrator or CFO, they must be doing backflips in happiness.
So, I mean, hospitals right now, some of our focus is on surgery centers. We absolutely have a solution for both. It's just hospitals have a longer and more complex sales cycle. They're often a little bit.
Oh, I messed up the nomenclature. I apologize. The surgery center.
Yeah.
Same
so the
thing.
surgery center,
Same question.
Absolutely. So that same surgery center, Stephen, wants to get 25 more.
Yeah.
And I want to deliver them 25 more, but we got to get the inventory on that side of it. And then we're going to make 1/2 and 3/4 size. All the components are the same. We built this very modular. It'll just have 1 valve instead of 2 and the same control module. So literally all but 3 parts would be the same on the smaller sizes. They want 25 of those. They will literally go to 100 of our containers in a 4 OR surgery center a year after we first launched the 25. And they want that because obviously they see the revenue uplift in that point. Now, is everyone going to have that same level of increase every time within 3 weeks? No, they won't. But just as the hospital system that I met with yesterday, they canceled the case. And often a canceled case is a 5-figure impact because they couldn't process these in time. So there is definitely a lot of revenue opportunity.
I want everyone to know, Dr. Bach is not just some brilliant surgeon. He's also kind of a historian, maybe even the authority in sterilization. And I'm just curious, Dr. Bach, you wrote a paper that dates back to 18 something. I think that's correct. Do you look at this as like the next kind of revolution in sterilization from a historic perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I look at what sterilization now is, it's antiquated, it's tedious, it's analog, it's slow, it's prone to error. My personal belief is this is this will be the new gold standard. And so I personally believe ASCs will almost exclusively use this. Hospitals will use this. As time goes on, they're going to look back and say, what were we doing? Why were we playing around with blue wrap? Why were we torturing ourselves with 2 hour processes to versus 30 minutes? Why were we wrapping things in, it's paper thin. Like you're
Right.
going to protect your sterile instruments with this. And if you have a drop of moisture, it penetrates and wicks your bacteria. So when people are getting joint replacements, what's protecting the instruments that go into their body is this. It's almost insane. But the sterilization processes happened with the autoclave like 150 years ago, and we've kept the same technology. It's been the same. The engineers in the 1930s made the autoclave what it is today. But once it's great. It sterilizes stuff magically. But once it comes out, you can't touch it.
Right.
You can't move it too quickly. You have to let the steam naturally come out. This changes this. And so I personally believe it's the gold standard. I mentioned that already, but when we look back, we're going to be like, I don't understand why we didn't do this earlier. So that's what I think this is an amazing product, is because it's going to change everything. Like if I had a joint replacement, I don't want to be protected from bacteria with this. I want to be protected with this guy.
And what convinces you that it's clinically superior, not just operationally better?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So operationally, for sure, increase the surgical volume by 75% to anybody that's trying to get more revenue. That's music to their ears. But clinically, because the rate of infection with any surgery is about 2%. Now you may say, that's not that high. I don't want to be that 2%. Bad things happen with 2%. And so, and I've showed this before, you're protecting yourself from a negative infectious environment by paper thin plastic. And this, you can splash water on it, you can transport it, you can, I don't want to say spit on it, but you can do whatever you want. And as soon as that vacuum seal is cracked open, it's still safe. So it's like, if you want to eat tuna, canned anchovies, or anchovies from Italy, and I say, well, I'll can it for you. It's going to be vacuum sealed. Or I got this other option of Italian anchovies, but I'm going to wrap it in this really carefully, and then I'll send it to you. Which one do you think is more sterile or safe? Obviously, this guy. So, my suspicion is that if a hospital actually studies this, and they will find that infection risk of 2% drops probably even more. I think it will be a clinically significant outcome improvement. That's my personal suspicion. Because I've seen other products where they come out and it's a little bit more expensive or whatnot, which this is cost neutral to savings, that when they actually studied this sterilizing agent for another on a hospital-wide system, although it's more expensive, it saved the hospital money on readmissions and so forth. And so, and the expenses associated with that. Like an infected total joint costs like $90,000. If you prevent just one of those, you're saving yourself money. And so I think that when they study that, they will definitely see that this reduces the infection risk, operationally better, revenue increasing. So that's a game changer. And I've told Allan this before. One of the reasons why I believe in this product so much is that it's good for everybody. It's good for the doctors. I don't get delayed. It's good for the patients. I believe a lower infection risk. They don't get delayed or compromised. It's good for the hospital. Everything goes smoothly. It's good for the payers, no readmission risks. So it's one of the few products that's good for everybody. That's why I think that this is truly the gold standard for the future.
And I think it is so impressive that, you've invested in the company multiple times, and yet you're one of the top shoulder surgeons in the country. I mean, that's just, and it's pretty impressive. So, Allan, I just want to make sure I understand the mechanics. Like, what was the technical insight that allowed Zuno to eliminate the porous barriers?
Well, I mean, so it was not technically designed, but conceived by a guy that was a hip and knee rep for DePuy, J&J DePuy, and another one that was doing hip and knee for Zimmer, and they were friends. And talking about all the times that they see a hole or a tear, they go in to help a surgeon like Dr. Bach do a case, and all of a sudden, no, there's a tear in the wrap, case is delayed or canceled, and they're kind of going, okay, we're gonna have to reschedule it. Everybody's upset, and they thought there's got to be a better way. Now, these guys are not engineers; they'd never launched a product, so they didn't really know exactly what it was going to look like. And it's really myself and Chris Fieser, our chief technology officer, and we kind of joined a board in about 7-8 years ago, and really brought what you see here into a viable product of how are we going to do that? And the idea was we're going to capture that vacuum seal, and we're going to be able to monitor that low pressure state. And it's the IP that we filed kind of along that line to be able to make sure that this idea was protected. But it also was an immense challenge to get electronics to work inside a steam chamber that reaches 275 degrees Fahrenheit and pumps steam in at 30 PSI to get through those porous barriers, which we don't really need it at that pressure, but we don't want to change how the autoclave works. And that has been a bit of the challenge that we had to crack, that we've now cracked, and that why we're in multiple centers that are paying full price for it. And I was never going to put something into customer hands that was going to cause them problems. It had to be solving them problems. And so we held back from, we would have engagements and short engagements, but I wasn't going to leave it with them and use it in a clinical setting until we knew it was going to deliver fantastic value. And it has, at this point. So we're very comfortable now scaling it up that we have that.
So, and you have FDA clearance?
Yeah, we had to get a de novo clearance, what a de novo means is there's nothing like you in the field whatsoever. And so you have to do a lot of extra testing. And where we were really unique and why the FDA said we would like you to pursue a de novo pathway is electronics running in the autoclave. They said no one's ever done that. And they had a lot of skepticism that we could accomplish that. And one of the things I'm most proud about, Stephen, is when we finally got our clearance, and we had to do that through COVID, by the way, and working through the infectious disease and control division of the FDA through COVID, they were a little busy during that time. But they sent us an email afterwards, actually with a thank you for being so patient with them and doing so much testing work to address their concerns in that space. So we had a really great, interaction engagement. And now that we have that, we become our own predicate for 510Ks. So anything we do in the future, we're using our 510K. And it also created, by the way, a new category of, it created a new category of device, which is called a rigid container with electronic monitoring. And with our patents and our IP, we're really going to be the only one in that product category.
Can you talk to me about the administrator in regards to what's their reaction after the first deployment from a staffing perspective, a revenue perspective, a time perspective, et cetera? I'm really trying to get to ROI.
Yeah, I mean, so one of my interesting things is in the sales process. If I have somebody going, I'm going to be able to cut back half a person in SPD, and that's going to be my savings. That's actually the wrong answer to that. I don't even want to, if that's really their number one priority, I probably don't want to sell into that organization. And the reason being is that's not where the value is. now the value might be getting rid of overtime, staff overtime, and I think there is some real value to that, and we've seen that achieved in every place that we've been. But more so, it's about everything running smoothly in the OR, and eventually, if not even immediately, that will lead to more cases. And so, most everything in the health system is all about lowering costs, because there's very few things that will actually bring the potential to get more cases and increase revenue. And I think an administrator who's thinking more strategically about that is really important, which is why, even though the sterile processing manager is a really important stakeholder in it, we kind of need somebody who's a bit more focused on the financial implications of us bringing those in.
What about Zuno itself? Like, how quickly can you scale? Do you plan on, really increasing capacity, et cetera? And then how does that go into how are you getting distribution?
So this was the boxes you see here are a 2023 model. We built about 100 of them, and that was a trial in hospitals and surgery centers and get their feedback and ideally convert some of them into sales, which we've done, and see what some of the challenges are by starting to have these in a scale, not 5 or 6 of them, but 100 out there. And we've learned a lot, and we've done a lot of design improvements for service, for scaling to drop weight, so we're dropping a couple of pounds out of that, which is a really important kind of component to that. And we've done all of that, and we're ready to build our 2026 model now. And we actually will fire off a new build and start, and we'll still be at a little bit of a higher price point. This investment round will allow us to bring all of the manufacturing domestic, and that's through partners. We're not manufacturing all ourselves. We'll do the final assembly, but we'll be able to bring that domestic bar 2 items, which will be done out of Israel. And then the rest of it is a simple assembly, and it's us really revising how simple that assembly is, how easy it is to service. We're really at the point now, Stephen, it's just, we need capital. And with the boots on the ground in sales and service and the streamlined, manufacturing and tooling that we'll have from this round, we're ready to scale. Now we'll focus on getting the formula right in California. And a part of that, it's just such a big economy here. There's so many surgery centers and hospitals. I could get to positive cash flow just in this market alone. I don't want to scale up service and assembly here. It's an expensive place to do that. We'll do R&D here, and we'll do that more in the central US so that as we scale, we do that. And I think we're probably by the end of 27, we could be covering the entire US. But I think to start, next 6 months, we'd really focus on perfecting the formula for scaling in the California market, and then, branching out into different regions and making sure we're getting it right.
And you chose an interesting model. You chose a subscription model, right?
Yeah,
rather than capital equipment. Why did you do that?
Well, so I came from the software background back in the whole days where we sold software, and then you try to upgrade them as you go. And then software industry realized, well, that's not gonna get us where we need to be, and we have to go to a SaaS model. So I was running companies at that time and converting them over to a SaaS model, which was a pretty painful experience. But the other thing is there's a lot of tech in this lid to make it work. And hospitals have a tendency to, outsource maintenance of things that they buy to the cheapest third-party provider that they had. And that creates a real exposure of us damaging our brand because someone's not taking care of the container in the way they need to. And by having it as a service model approach, one, the hospitals have a known cost, and they can run these more times and actually drop their per cycle rate. Also save, because of that quick turn, they can even save on equipment purchases of surgeon-specific cases and things. And we've had some facilities already bank some savings on that. But it also, from a shareholder and a person managing for shareholders' perspectives, that consistent recurring revenue is what I really wanted, and I think we'll build that scale up. In a SaaS world, Stephen, people worry about churn, right? Because what's the competitive product that's going to come up to displace you? I think we will have next to zero churn, because you're not going to see surgical facilities go to this, the gold standard, using Dr. Bach's words, suddenly back to wrap. Now they'll still use wrap. There's weird sizes and shapes of things and ones that come in pretty heavy. There will always be a place for that. And we don't need to own the market within it, but we can have a dominant place in that and have a company that really turns significant cash flow month after month after month as these get out in the field.
Dr. Bach, last question. I mean, looking ahead 5 years from now, how do you think the technology changes surgical workflows nationally?
Yeah. So, as the gold standard, you can do more surgeries in a day. There's less unexpected delays and cancellations. I think the infection risk will be shown to be lower. So then everybody's going to want to use these. And this is kind of a launch point for additional digital technologies out there. I don't think we can go into it too much, but there are premier healthcare institutions that will potentially use the technology and digitize everything.
Yeah, and without naming that name, I think, Stephen, what Dr. Bach's alluding to is I've long had a vision of let's get this in there. It's a little bit of the Trojan horse into the health systems doing surgery. And we have battery power and we have computing power sitting on a sterile box of instruments. There's a lot of interesting stuff that we can do in tracking sterilization analytics, what's inside the box, where it's at within the location of a large facility. It provides a platform for us to scale into a lot of other services. If we had all those things packed in, you start running into IT issues and cybersecurity and all these other things that make it more complex to be able to address. So it's kind of better to let's kind of take care of the blocking and tackling and let you do more surgeries and have a much more efficient way to do the sterilization. And then we can layer on, just by changing this box that's in the middle here, this control system, we can actually layer on a lot of value add functionality on top of that. But
it's funny. The business really has a double bottom line in the sense that maybe even a triple. So one is obviously it cuts down on infections. That's amazing. But and then the other is, all right, you guys make money every time you set up a subscription. But you don't often get this in the kind of like manufacturer customer relationship, which is the surgery center is making more money too.
Correct.
Benefits everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is in the healthcare system, they want to drive more complex cases to the surgery center because it's a much lower cost overall. And, in order to decrease the cost of healthcare, it's very expensive to do in the hospitals. And sometimes the recovery rate is worse in hospitals just because of the other potential infections that somebody can pick up. And we provide a solution to really help the surgery centers take that on. Now, Stephen, I do want it for the people that are on phone. I want to correct one thing in that about it lowering infections because the FDA would not be happy if I kind of allowed that to go on. So Dr. Bach had mentioned that's his personal opinion. I wouldn't disagree with it. I think eventually we'll show that, but the amount of testing that's required to actually prove that out is quite a bit. We're not quite there. We're not quite there yet. So I do want to just
Yeah, so that's a personal belief, but I think that will be borne out with time. But the operational benefits and all the other benefits are already positive.
Amazing. So there's a bunch of audience questions. I'm going to let Callie take this over. Callie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Can you discuss your IP? What prevents incumbents from replicating the solution and leveraging their installed base?
So we have 4 issued patents that actually involve quite a number of different aspects. One of the big ones, though, is a utility patent for creating a subatmospheric state in an autoclave and then being able to monitor that subatmospheric state after it's out of the autoclave. That's actually one of the really big ones that would make it next to impossible for somebody to do what we're doing without that. It's not just the way that we do it. Now, we have filed a lot of IP on the way that we do it as well and continue to do that to kind of build on our patent portfolio. For any people that are interested in our deck, I could send them a deck afterwards, and it has a slide specifically on the IP, the patent numbers, Also go into Google Patents, and you can search for Zuno Medical, and you'll be able to see those patents as well.
Great. And do you still use the autoclave?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So these don't sterilize, and that sometimes if somebody isn't familiar with it, that's sometimes a little bit confusing. What the key is, you put it in the autoclave and it's got to get sterilized, but something has to keep it sterile all the way until it's used in the OR. And that's where the polypropylene solutions or aluminum container with those filters that Dr. Bach ripped so easily, that's where those have been used in the past. Ours leverages all the functionality of the autoclave, including the vacuum cycle, and it's what allows it to seal, and then it keeps it sterile through that, but it doesn't do the sterilization.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
And are there additional regulatory hurdles internationally that could impact expansion timelines or cost?
So each geography, so there's something called a CE mark in Europe. Right now, none of my pro forma projections or anything actually factors in Europe or other markets. We have filed IP there. We believe there is significant market opportunity there, but whether we need to do that prior to exit, I don't know. I don't actually feel that we have to. I think there is an opportunity to, and I would only do that through distributorship. We are looking to be able to provide, sales and service directly. We think it's important that people are eating, breathing, sleeping the Zuno Smart Container that are out there within that. There are ways to amplify and leverage our sales efforts with the relationships and connections that we have. But I lived abroad and worked abroad for 6 years. I wouldn't dream of going into Europe with a direct sales force. We would absolutely do that through a distributor. But I think it's more likely that happens post an exit in 4 to 5 years.
Great.
U.S. healthcare is a pretty big market.
Thank you. Is there peer-reviewed or multi-center data showing reduced compromised instrument sets or improved OR uptime compared to the blue wrap?
We're in the early stages from that standpoint. We have done some white papers ourselves. They have not been, those white papers have not been peer reviewed. We do take those very seriously and provide all of the testing references and things to be able to show that. But we're still early in the market to be able to peer review some of that type of information. We absolutely expect to. We're just not quite there yet.
I will say that when you reduce the amount of this, the more porous barrier you use, the slower everything goes. And so when people have reduced the elements, the amount of this, it definitely speeds that up. And there are, I wrote an article describing this. It lists the references where less porous barrier, everything speeds up, and significantly when you do those techniques. However, when you remove it altogether, it's going to be even like an exponential speed up. So nothing yet, but we do have white papers that show 75% increase in surgical revenue and case volume, 75% reduction in processing time, sterilization time. And so an 7.5 minute save in OR turnover time. Those are all magical numbers in the world of surgery and sterilization.
Great, thank you. How many hospitals or surgery centers are currently live, and what is the average expansion footprint per account?
So we have 4 surgery centers live right now, 2 in the Bay Area, 2 in Southern Cal. There's been no expansion of those yet because we don't have additional inventory. We will have additional inventory in about 4 months from now, quite a significant growth on what we have with those 2026 models I mentioned earlier. And then the intent is to be cranking those out pretty much every month where we would until we are able to get the tooling on, and then we'll have the capability of building thousands a month sometime next year, probably right around spring next year. We will have that level of capacity. but we'll be rolling out hundreds by summer. We should be able to at least get out about 250 to 500 containers a month. And that will be at a higher price point. Next year is when we'll be able to drive them down to even a lower price.
And then who is the true buyer? Is it the SPD director, infection control, CFO? How long is that sales cycle?
At the surgery center, it is typically a facility manager. So a facility director could be an OR manager. Sometimes someone serves as both. The sterile processing person will be a key part of the engagement, certainly through the trial and some of those things, but they rarely have the decision-making authority and the financial authority to actually make that purchase. In the hospital setting, it's more a perioperative director. The SPD manager director is going to be an important part, and it depends on the size. If you're at a Cedars-Sinai or an HSS in New York, those SPD directors will have more purchasing authority, and you may end up with a first set in that. The one thing, so one of the terms in this is called loaner sets. So every time Dr. Bach is doing joint replacements, there's a whole bunch of loaner sets that get dropped off, and they're used for that procedure. And then the vendor, a Stryker, FX Shoulder, DePuy, Zimmer Biomet, they're taking them back away, the next day after it's over. And those are actually what really put a big burden on the heavy surgical facilities. But it's also the low-hanging fruit for us. I was just at a large size hospital that's unusually invested a lot in their sterile processing, and they had just purchased some brand new rigid containers, and he thought everything was taken care of and he wouldn't need these. But once he saw them and found out about them, and I was talking to him about loaner sets, he was like, the one thing that keeps coming back into my head is my loaner sets. I get 80 of these every day. And, sometimes they do have holes and tears, and it takes a while to be able to process them. These could be really useful in that. And so from a sales cycle perspective, our real opportunity is let's get in there just in the same way that surgery center I mentioned, we have 25. They want to scale now to 80 to 100, counting all the different sizes, because they see the benefits that it brings. So it's not really trying to replace their whole operation right off the bat. It's finding that low-hanging fruit that you can get into. Our sales cycle is a bit longer now because it's very new. It's really unique, and people need to, there's a learning curve. That's why we do a 1-week trial for free to help them kind of understand it and see it live in their facility. But then, from that standpoint, we've already seen it. We get more and more deployments. People are getting more comfortable for it, with it, and we're getting shorter sales cycle times.
Great. How much capital will you require to reach break even?
So, in terms of the inventory build, we don't expect to use any equity capital to build these containers. And a part of that is right now we're about an average of $1,700 per container across the 3 sizes, and we'll rent them for around $150 a month. So it's about a 12-month payback on that. Post the round and the investment in the tooling with our contract manufacturing partners, we'll drive that in half to about $850. That means our payback is 5 to 6 months. We have a lot of people in the credit markets that are pretty intrigued, including even some at an early stage. So one in particular that would look almost like a car lease, where they pay for everything on the container build, sits on their balance sheet, and they lease it back to us with on a 3-year term with a residual at the end of that. So that's one of the things we'll be doing early on. But as we scale, we'll be, basically borrowing capital on 5-year loans for these. And the inventory will be pretty much just in time. I don't plan to have lots of excess inventory. We will build them as we have a very predictable sales model and know where those are going. And so it's a fine line to be able to manage the supply and responding to people's needs that you need to, in the market when they have the problem, but also making sure that you're not building excess inventory ahead of where your sales demand is. So I think in terms of we could become cash flow positive in the California market by itself. We've kept things quite lean. My hope is to be able to actually have this as the final equity raise. I think we may have to have one more. One way that we haven't talked about through this is we have 3-year and 5-year contracts that offer a very significant savings and even a discount off of that if they pay that up front. We also have financing companies that would like to factor those agreements if they don't want to pay that cash up front. So that's another way that we can balance cash flow valleys through that process.
And then what milestones do you need to take to be strategically compelling, and who would be most logical for acquisition?
I mean, a lot of it's going to just be scale and penetration, I think, that in terms of milestones, we already have some really compelling efficiency savings. If I look at a Stryker Mako, they have a power set that takes an hour dry time. We could probably dry that in 10 minutes, which would have a huge impact to surgery centers. And, Strykers, that's a big focus to them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities operationally that we already have in place. But I think a lot of it is going to be about market acceptance and penetration. In terms of who the acquisition partners are, you could look at one side in providing services and products to the sterilization community. So things like Steris, Cardinal Health, Getinga. There are, different groups in that space, but also the orthopedic and spine vendors who are looking to have an advantage. So I think the Strykers, the J&J, DePue's, which I think they've actually spun off recently, DePuy separately, but Zimmer Biomet, Arthrex, all of those could be potential acquirers saying we want this as a strategic advantage to address the high volume surgical business and really have a unique kind of dominant capability.
And how secure are your supply channels?
I mean, for the volume that we're doing now, they're fine. And, aluminum is what most of it's built off of, and silicon would be the, second most prominent. There aren't rare earth metals within that. We do have magnets, but they're not that special. They're temperature rated magnets. So there's kind of an important component in it, but a lot of it's sourcing aluminum and then fabricating it at those places. There aren't a lot that can fabricate, to punch and stamp aluminum boxes this size, but there's enough of them that that's not, too big of a worry. And so I feel pretty confident with that. As we scale and get larger, we will definitely have dual suppliers into particular spaces, but at the early stages, it isn't cost effective to do that. It's better for us to partner with key ones.
And last question, let's just get a little more detailed into the raise. How much are you raising? What are the use of proceeds?
Yeah, so it's a 24 million pre-money. We're raising 12 million, making the post 36 million on that Series A preferred. The most of the proceeds are going really to two significant buckets. There's the building out the sales team, making sure we've got all the technology enablement to make them successful. When I say service, our service people will be salespeople. The service effort will be so simple, and we've already done that. That's really a lot of what the 26 model was all about, is to really make that service a kind of brain dead approach. And that person's actually looking to make that service visit a sales opportunity, and where can we deepen penetration? So that's a big component. We have basically no boots on the ground to get to where we're at now. And we know who we're going to hire in the California market. We have people who want a co-founder, another significant investor who's been very successful. And so we're ready to go with bringing them on board. I do quite a bit, and will continue to do quite a bit in that space. And then the other is tooling and manufacturing. So as an example, the lid and base here costs $1,200 to machine right now. Putting $1.2 million, $1.3 million in tooling will bring those costs down to $50 for those two parts, from $1,200 to $50. And that tool will last 1 million parts. So it's not as if we're going to have to repay that cost frequently. And that brings it from China that we did it on the last go around. We may do it domestically this time, where we all have to get quotes, but it brings it to being punched out of Mississippi is the kind of, I would say, the lead supplier for that group. So there is just a lot of areas there where we can increase output. They also can produce 680 of these lids and bases in an 8-hour shift out of Mississippi after doing that tooling. So there's a lot that just both drives down our costs, but also increases our output. That's where the bulk of the capital will go.
Great. Well, that concludes the questions. And thank you to the audience for all of the great questions. If you do have additional questions and want to be connected, some of you have already reached out to me to do that. So I will do that after this call. Reach out to me. I'm happy to make that connection. In turn, Zuno Medical will have all of your information as well. I do want to turn it back over to you, Allan, for any final words before we close out.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Bach, for taking the time out of your day to join us. I remember back when you wanted to research sterilization a little bit more, and you've become such an expert in it. And thank you to everybody for taking the time to hear our story and the great questions that you fed into Callie. We're very passionate about it, very excited about it. I think Dr. Bach articulates it so well. Everybody wins, everybody benefits. And, by the way, we can probably drop about 100 to 150 million pounds of waste, and plastic that's been created. And that's not even just the environmental aspect of it. It actually has a real financial cost to the health systems to dispose of this. And so there's a great opportunity there that sometimes gets overlooked when we're focused on that. So I really appreciate you joining us and learning more, and would be happy to answer your individual questions offline and help you understand any more about the opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.